noises, which then sail across acoustical space and are reconstructed in the brain of the listener so that these thoughts are magically reconstructed in the brain of the listener. We take this for granted, but when you analyze it, it's an extraordinarily mysterious, almost you could say supernatural power, which we all exercise all the time. And I believe that this is something which these psychedelics kick-started in the neural architecture of our remote ancestors.
Terence, what would you consider to be a sufficient dose?
5 dried grams of Stropharia cubensis. And what I would urge you to do is, if you think you're a sophisticate, buy a scale and weigh the dose that you've been calling good enough. It may stand your hair on end, because there are a lot of people running around who think they know what the psychedelic experience is about, who have only scuffed their feet on the doorstop, haven't even entered into the atrium, let alone explored the cellar, the attic, and the basement of these places.
Are there any legal plants that you are aware of that contain DMT?
Oh yeah, there are a number of plants that contain DMT. The problem is to find one that contains enough that it's worth your while to try and do something with it. Currently, the hot one on that grocery list is a plant called Desmanthus illinoisensis, the Illinois bundleweed. It's interesting that it's called bundleweed because there's no history of human usage, but as many of you probably know, a bundle is what a Plains Indian shaman calls his mojo bag. So the fact that it's called bundleweed is fairly suggestive. The outer bark of the roots of that plant contain a very hefty hit of DMT, and you can order it from various exotic plant companies and can experiment with it. DMT has to be smoked. If you take it orally, it will be destroyed by an enzyme in your intestines, so it has to be smoked in most situations.
At the end of your book, Psilocybin Magic Mushroom Grower's Guide, there is an ad for ordering cubensis spores. It says, void where prohibited, California. How can we order them in California?
Well, I guess you have to have a friend with a post office box out of California. If you're wondering why California is the only state in the union that has made psilocybin spores illegal, because you see the spores contain no psilocybin. It isn't illegal because it contains psilocybin. It's illegal because you can grow mushrooms from it. It's because there was a clown a few years ago, maybe he's still around, this guy Ken Matty, and he was defeated in the Republican primary for governor a few years ago. He was defeated because he admitted that he, years ago, had a puff of marijuana. And so after his defeat in the Republican primary, he went to his staff and said, I've got to get some anti-drug legislation associated with my name. See what you can come up with. And the best they could come up with was a pissant bill to make mushroom spores illegal. So we all have the privilege of living in the only state in the Union that has seen fit to guard you from this hideous menace.
If hallucinogenics caused mutations in the consciousness in the past, do you think they are doing so in the present? And if so, or if not, what do you see as the future of consciousness?
Well, the human physical form seems to have stabilized about 50,000 years ago, right around the time that language began to emerge and culture began to take hold. And it's thought that once you possess language, and culture, then change, mutation, is transferred into the cultural domain. That's why we haven't changed physically very much in the last 50,000 years, but our cultural changes have just been lightning fast. I mean, we have fashions which don't even last 6 months before we move on to the next one. I think that the way I think about these psychedelics is that they are like catalysts for the imagination. And what that means specifically is they are catalysts for language. Language is somehow the new body of mankind. And so what we have to do is change our language. And some of you who lived through the 1960s probably know that the major legacy of the LSD era, still with us, is that it empowered certain shifts in language, certain concepts that previously couldn't even be articulated. I mean, these things come in for a lot of being sneered at by straight people, but nevertheless, notions such as the vibe of a situation, or ego tripping, or laying a guilt trip on somebody. I can remember, in most cases, the very first time I ever heard each of these phrases, and how it was like something clicks in your mind. You say, I don't understand what this person means, and then you say, oh, they mean something that I never before knew how to indicate. And then you try it out and use it yourself. We cannot evolve any faster than we evolve our language, because you cannot go to places that you cannot describe. So somehow the description comes first. The compass needle must be set on a linguistic goal, and then the culture can be steered in that direction. And I think that part of the way I see my book is I'm introducing new linguistic models for reality and human evolution. And if they are good models, I believe ideas are just like animals. They compete in an environment of natural selection. The good ideas, the swift and strong and clean ideas, will triumph over the slow, the muddled, and the incomplete. And so if we can articulate our devotion to the psychedelic experience, if we can articulate its importance and its transformative power, then we will eventually be able to place it on the social agenda, and then we will be heard, but not if we don't articulate our intent.
What role does ayahuasca play in our planetary and human evolution? How does ayahuasca compare with other hallucinogens such as mushrooms and peyote?
Well, for those of you who aren't familiar with ayahuasca, this is a combinatory hallucinogenic beverage that is in use in a wide area over in the upper Amazon basin, and now it's spread down into Brazil. There are a number of interesting things about ayahuasca. On one level, what's interesting about it is that there is nothing in it that is not in the brain of each one of you as you sit here. It is, in a sense, not a drug at all, but a neurotransmitter cocktail. And this is very suggestive, you see, because it means that natural brain chemistry is very close to being some kind of hallucinogenic trip. The other thing that's interesting about ayahuasca is that in the Amazon basin, where it's been used for thousands of years, the people get together in small groups at night in dark places, and they sing. They get loaded and they sing. And then when you sit with these people and listen to them discuss their experiences, they talk about these songs not as though they were musical performances, but as though they were pictorial creations of some sort. In other words, someone will